right, how you doing today? So Jeff and I sitting here with you again on the journey of healing, of recovering, of understanding anger, and I'm glad that you're here with us. So for this conversation, and as always, I've got some papers here with me because I can't remember it all. For this conversation, we're going into the cycle of anger, and the cycle starts with the triggering event, right? So it was what that trigger is. It could be internal, it could be external, and then from that point, it goes into negative thoughts. And then from that point there, it goes to an emotional response, and then it goes to physical symptoms, and then it goes to a behavior response. So if you're listening and you're like, what? I wanted to share those with you so you can kind of maybe even slow the video down, go back, and maybe write those down and put some arrows. One arrow to the next, to the next. So as Jeff and I continue this conversation, you're able to make sense of it, and then you're able to implement, the learned lessons here in your life as you're overcoming and you're moving forward with anger. So let's talk about the first one, a triggering event. And the thing that I wrote down here for a triggering event is I wrote down an example of the event being having a bad day at work or having a bad day at school. Right? And expand a little bit on that, a triggering event.
Well, the trigger event could be anything that kind of gets you upset. It can be unmet expectation. It can be a fear of something. It can be poor communication. So that trigger event can be anything that kind of gets you upset. That kind of gets you out of your norm.
Yeah, and then here's the thing too with the triggering event. No reaction has happened yet.
Right.
And that's why I like to sit here with Jeff and when we're having this conversation with you as you're engaged in your journey of understanding anger and healing from anger. Is that triggering events are just that. Mm-hmm. They do not reach the next stage if we don't let them. And then hopefully we'll get to the point that we understand these and we're able to slow them down. So again, triggering events are, you're having a bad day at school, you're having a bad day at work, you feel disrespected, you feel that someone, did something that maybe you don't like or you don't agree with. We talk about the one getting cut off at work.
Right.
I get to work and I don't have the key to my office, which has happened before, right?
Right.
So these are triggering events, and they happen to all average Joes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then from the triggering event, we have negative thoughts.
Right.
So let's say a triggering event, so that we're able to make sense of a negative thought, is I'm at home, I'm a dad, and my kids are just acting wild, right? The whole house is trashed. What could be a negative thought that I could have for my trigger event?
Is that it's going to be this way forever, or that the kids are always messy, they don't never clean up after themselves.
Yeah.
The harder I work, the more they mess up.
Yeah.
Those sort of things.
So you're kind of getting it. Jeff hit the nail on the head. I think that's a saying. So yeah, I'm the triggering event was the parenting factor, and then as he mentioned, it's me, creating these thoughts.
Yeah, I'm a poor parent. I'm a terrible parent.
Okay.
It would be that negative thought. It's the snowball that starts.
Yep. I've always liked the whole snowball effect. Starts up there and it gets bigger and bigger.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to not just wait for it at the bottom of the hill. That's going to be a big snowball. And I can't stop something that big. So instead, we understand how it rolls and how it becomes bigger.
Right.
So again, if you need to go back into the video, we started with the triggering event, and then now we're going into the negative thought. And then from there, if it keeps spiraling, if that snowball keeps getting bigger and bigger, it goes to an emotional response.
Right.
And an emotional response could be, when you're looking at, I'm the worst parent ever, or, I'm not doing a good parenting job. I could feel guilt, which is an emotional response. I could feel shame, which is an emotional response.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you. And that just, like you said, it adds on to that snowball to now we are a little bit bigger. And if you have those negative thoughts and now you have that negative emotion, it's just getting a little bigger. You're just winding that ball up a little tighter to catch more momentum. So it's hard to stop at that point. Yeah. You can stop it, but it's getting a little harder to stop. Where if you would have stopped it from just a trigger,
correct,
this could have been all over with. But now we're picking up a little bit more momentum. And it's a little harder to stop now.
Yeah.
You're just kind of feeding into it.
Exactly. So then from that point, once you have this emotional response, the guilt, the shame, I'm there parenting, and the kids aren't, they're not behaving right, so I'm reacting to it. I'm reacting to that trigger through my negative thoughts. I'm the worst parent, and then I go to my emotional response, the shame, the guilt. Then it leads to the next point, and that one is the physical symptoms, which can be tachycardia or rapid heart rate. What are some other anger symptoms that I could feel?
Probably some sweating. Probably headaches. It can
clench fists, right?
Yeah,
getting upset.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It's a lot of things, and it's kind of hard. Like I said, this is the way that the body is just kind of very validating those other emotions that you already had. That negative
correct.
Thoughts and those negative feelings. It's just the way the body is kind of validating those things. So it makes it seems real.
Exactly. And I think, as you're listening to this video and maybe you're looking at what are my physical symptoms or what are your physical symptoms,
Right.
I think that, even with Jeff and I, we may have different physical symptoms to anger. I know for me it's my jaw. My jaw gets clenched.
Clenching, yep.
I've seen some people where they have a twitch on the eye.
Right.
What's yours?
I don't know. I probably get a little fidgety.
Fidgety, okay.
Probably I'm thinking a 100 miles an hour, so my brain is scattered. So.
Yeah.
And that's just a recipe for poor decisions.
Exactly. And I think, too, is getting to know yourself. Mm-hmm. So as this snowball's coming down and we're going from from the triggering event to the negative thought to the emotional response to the physical symptom, you're really understanding who you are.
Right.
You're able to say, okay, this is the way that I tend to function in these type of situations.
Right.
And we're going to be able to address it. We're going to work through it. But I think it's important to get to know ourselves.
Absolutely.
The last dot on the list, right, the last arrow from the physical symptoms, it goes to the behavioral response. So this is sometimes what we see in society.
Right.
When we see someone yelling, when we see a fist get thrown, right? What do you see that tends to happen to really push people to that last phase?
You see that, it's usually the yelling, once all these other things are kind of validated, you see the yelling, you see the cursing, you see the beating on the table, you see all those different external things that kind of validates that, hey, yeah, I'm angry and I want your attention and I want this resolved sort of thing. But I think your question is, how do we get there?
Yeah. I think you answered it. I mean,
okay.
Well, we got there by the trigger, right?
Right. We got there
by the initial trigger.
Yeah. And just following that, just catering to that path of anger, just falling in line. If anywhere in there, I feel like if you stop any one of those previous kind of reaction, then you never get to that external kind of behavior.
Yeah. And I know before we started, Jeff and I, we always chat up before we start the videos. Before we started this one, the lecture that we're doing, we looked at well, how can we help someone understand from point A all the way to point B or point A to point Z? And I think it's, writing it out. Get a sheet of paper, literally get a blank sheet of paper, and then on that sheet of paper have a circle, right? Or, start it from the top and then say, okay, this is the beginning, and then go all the way down to the very end. And then I think that's where you're kind of going to be able to understand this is the trigger all the way down to that last, physical symptom.
Yep, you get to see how each part of those play a role into you having that external kind of outburst. So you get a chance to say, hey, I'm at this level, let me stop here. Or I'm at a 5 and I don't want to get to that 10. You have an opportunity to kind of see that as you draw that circle out, that this is my 0, this is my 5, and this is 10.
Exactly. I think sometimes too, and this will happen whether I'm working with someone or doing a consultation call or, I don't know, reading a case study. Sometimes we tend to want to put a Band-Aid on the issue, right? So as I have anger, teach me a quick coping skill, right? And we could do that, some deep breathing, some muscle relaxation, et cetera, et cetera. I find it much more effective, and we talked a little bit about this, to first figure out this whole cycle. Like, how does it start? How does it end? And then, as you're watching the video, maybe you're able to go back to the beginning, slow it down, write down each of those stages, and then go back into your personal life and put examples of that. Like, what would be an example for you for a triggering event? And then once you write the example, go to the next point, negative thought, an emotional response, physical symptom, and a behavioral response.
That's right, yeah. Once you do that, and once you get the energy, anger gives us energy. So it's easy to kind of cycle through these steps pretty quick, but if you just pay attention, you can recognize where you're at on that anger cycle, and you can kind of cut it off at some point before it gets to that anger outburst.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you being here as always, hanging out, chatting with us, learning a little bit more about anger. I hope that you're able to, again, be kind to yourself. If you fall down, get back up, keep moving forward.